is that? Oh, sure. Now you pick me up. End of the World Day reminds us how fake apocalypse warnings distress people around the world. Okay. So I'm also pleased to let you know that it is also World Meditation Day. So after you are freaked out about Apocalypse Day, yeah, you can relax and take a deep breath. It is also, in terms of a more serious day, it is also the National American Red Cross Founders Day, which I think is a really important thing. Today at my office, they had a blood drive, which I'm always excited when they do. 140 years ago, Clara Barton established the American Red Cross, and it's been a source of aid in our nation and in our community since then. And I think of all of the national days that today is, I think that the National American Red Cross Founders Day is a really good one to celebrate. So there you go. Now you know, May 21st, lots of things. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Hammond. All right, if you'd all stand and repeat with me the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, the next item on our agenda is the open session. This is a chance where anybody public hearing matters. So if anybody wants to do that, just come up here.
Hi, I'm Andrew Loosley. I just live east of the cemetery, and I'd like to put forward a proposal for a dog park. We have some excellent space just adjacent to City Hall. The city needs it, so please consider. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you.
Anybody else for the public hearing? Or not the public hearing, the open session? Seeing nobody else for the open session, we will move on. And let's go to our presentations. The first presentation is we've invited Nate Allen. Nate, you can introduce yourself when you get up and where you're from as well too, to introduce or explain to us further what approval voting is. It's one of the methods of voting, and you'll probably go over some of those, won't you, Dave?
Yeah.
Good to have you here.
Mayor, before Nate begins, sorry, Nate, I just by way of disclosure, I and my firm have represented Utah Approves on prior matters, but I don't represent you on this and am not a part of this presentation. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor and Council. I would try to honor National Talk Like You today if I could do my entire presentation.
I will give you extra credit if you can do that, man.
Well, yeah, so my name is Nate Allen. I'm the executive director of Utah Approves. We work on a voting method called approval voting, which I'll get into here in a second. I did just want to start by talking about what my ask is here today. We are currently working with the legislature on creating a pilot program around this method, similar to the pilot program that exists for ranked choice voting. And so what we're doing right now is just going around to city councils and giving presentations to educate on the method and ask for a letter written in support to the legislature that essentially just says that you would like to see the option for the city to use this method, or for any city to use this method for that matter. So writing this letter does not opt Centerville into using approval voting at all. It just shows the legislature that there might be a so we can go to this next slide here. So what is approval voting? Essentially, all it is it lets you say yes or no to each candidate on the ballot rather than yes to just one candidate. In other words, just giving your opinion to every candidate. The candidate with the most yes votes, or in other words, the highest approval rating, wins the election. So you can see an example of an approval voting ballot on the right here. Essentially, the only change to the ballot is to that instruction line, and then people can give their opinion on every candidate rather than just one. On this next slide here, how is approval voting different than our current system? So our current system, plurality voting, elects based on what we call exclusive support. Basically, this just means that the largest single slice of the population chooses who the winning candidate is. Sometimes that may be 40% or 35, or in some elections 30, and that percentage just goes lower the more candidates that are in a race. Under approval voting, it elects based on favorability rating. So we do these favorability polls ahead of oftentimes presidential elections, which basically just shows how liked every candidate is in the race. And so you're allowed to say that you like multiple candidates, just like in approval voting, and whoever has the highest favorability rating essentially just wins under approval voting. What this does is it makes sure that candidates with a broad-based appeal win the election rather than people who only appeal to one single slice of the population. You can see under our current system, plurality voting elects candidates with a passionate base of support. So that doesn't mean that the passionate base of support candidate wouldn't win under an approval voting election. They may be part of those multiple slices in that broad-based appeal. It just means that you have to appeal to multiple slices of the population to best represent the entire population rather than that largest single slice, which is oftentimes far less than the majority. Our current system works really well when you only have two candidates in a race. Makes sense. You would just say which one you like out of the two, and whoever has the most likes wins. But when you start to add candidates to the race, we start to experience what we call vote splitting. And so you may be familiar with vote splitting when you have three candidates in a race and two candidates are liked by 60% of the population, and one of the other candidates is only liked by 40%. And those two 60% candidates split the vote and only get 30% each. So the candidate who only represents 40% wins the election, which is not the most liked candidate in the race. So approval voting works really well with any number of candidates in the race. And so because you're able to give your opinion on each candidate, that means that whoever is actually most liked wins, and you don't have to worry about vote splitting. On this next slide. So what I'll be going over today is just why approval voting. So these first few better reflects voter values, as I've been talking about. It chooses that most representative broad-based candidate, produces those broadly supported consensus winners. It limits vote splitting and spoiled elections. It's incredibly cost effective. There's potential cost savings if you eliminate your primary election. The main reason that we do primary elections is to narrow down the field to try to reduce the occurrence of vote splitting. And so because that's not a concern under approval voting, we're able to eliminate that primary election. And that's a potential area for cost savings for the city. Additionally, it's secure, transparent, easily audited, simple and easy to administer and explain. And ultimately, it's more expressive because you can say what you think about every candidate. Next slide here. So first, I just want to talk about voter values and these consensus candidates that I've mentioned. You'll see on the right side here, there's a couple of graphs. The first one shows an election under plurality voting. So an election we're all familiar with. This is the 2020 Republican gubernatorial primary, where Spencer Cox won the Republican nomination. He won that race with 36% of the vote. John Huntsman Jr. Came in a close second with 35%, and it goes down from there. On the right side is an approval voting election. Approval voting is currently used in St. Louis, Missouri. Under this election, Tashara Jones won the election with 57% of the vote. Cara Spencer came in second place with 46%, and Lewis Reed got 39% approval across the population. One thing to point out is that all three of these candidates have a higher percentage than the winner and plurality voting. The reason that we find that important is because high winning percentages gives the winner a strong mandate to lead. When they have confidence that they best represent the population, especially the majority of the population, they have more confidence in themselves and actioning the policies that they support. In addition, the voters have more confidence when they can see that there is high support for the winning candidate. Additionally, this shows true levels of support. So because of vote splitting, we often don't see the true levels of support for a candidate. It's likely that Spencer Cox still would have won under an approval voting election, but because he only got 36% of the vote, he receives all sorts of criticism for saying he doesn't represent a majority, when in reality, he has a very high approval rating. And so it's likely that he would still win, but being able to see that true level of support just gives people more confidence in leading and voters more confidence in who wins. Additionally, when there is no splitting the vote, you get those broadly supported candidates. So again, those people who best represent the entire population. Lastly, candidates have a very simple strategy: just appeal to as many people as possible. So when you go to a voter who may have heard of another candidate, you don't have to talk bad about that candidate and say what's wrong with them. You can say, well, if you like them, I support many similar policies and you can also vote for them. It's a very straightforward way to campaign and just talk about the issues that you actually care about.
Nate, in communities that use approval voting, have you noticed fewer negative ads and fewer attack ads in those campaigns?
I don't have the specific data on that. I do have some exit polling results from St. Louis, which I'll show later, but basically to show that people felt like it was in general a more positive environment, the voters that were participating in that election.
Because people have less reason to criticize the other candidates. They're just trying to say, hey, here are the things that I could do. I'll vote for me.
That's exactly right. So going on to this next slide here, this is a computer simulation, but this basically just tries to represent, it's called voter satisfaction. What that means is just how happy people are with the election after it's over and with the winner. If you hit the next button a couple of times here, you'll get some circles on the screen. Again, it points out that there's 5 candidates here. All methods are roughly identical when you only have 2 candidates in the race. So the first method here is plurality voting. You'll see that it's very simple on that left side. It raises pretty high on that simplicity metric, but the voter satisfaction is relatively low because you see a lot of that vote splitting. And so you don't guarantee that the candidate who's actually most liked wins, and people don't have as much confidence because of those lower winning mandates. If you hit next again here, this is instant runoff voting, or also known as ranked choice voting. This can improve the outcomes of the race. It's obviously a bit more complex, so it ranks lower on that simplicity metric. But there's also a wide variation. So in some circumstances, it can produce a more liked candidate. In some circumstances, it can do just as poorly as plurality voting does with vote splitting issues. Next here is approval voting. So you'll see that this one ranks really highly on that simplicity metric. But it also does a really good job in producing voter satisfaction, where people are actually happy with a candidate because they feel and are confident that it best represents the overall voting population. Ideally, we would pick a system that falls in that dotted line on the right, which is a magic best winner, where 100% of the population is happy with an election, but that will obviously never happen. So our goal is to increase that as much as possible, and approval voting does a really good job of that. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about security and administration. So the first point here is on precinct summability. That's basically just a fancy term for saying that we're able to count the votes in the place where they are cast. This is a big problem with some other alternatives like ranked choice voting, where you either have to truck paper ballots into a central counting location, or you have to electronically submit the raw ballot data to that central location, which basically just creates a single weak point for security. Approval voting is able to be counted in the individual locations, and then you send raw totals to a reporting location, and that's the exact same as our current system. For that reason, the county clerks in Utah, all 29 county clerks actually have stated that approval voting is the only alternative that has an audit trail that they are comfortable with, which we find really meaningful. Additionally, county clerks are supportive of implementing approval voting if cities want to try it. They don't need their whole county to opt in. And it doesn't cost them anything extra, which I'll talk about a little bit on this next slide.
And just to point out I'm a math guy, but when you talk about the summable totals and you go back to this graph where you had our Utah gubernatorial primary versus St. Louis, the percentages of the St. Louis add up to a more than 100% because, for example, Ms. Jones shows up 57% of those ballots is the right way to read that. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah. So you basically divide it over you do the number of approvals over the ballots cast rather than the approvals cast. So you get a percentage of approval across the population.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh yeah, the last point on this is just that there are fewer spoiled ballots in the approval voting election. The number one reason that ballots get spoiled is actually because of overvoting. People tend to mark 2 people and then their ballot gets tossed out and you can only mark 1. This obviously eliminates that possibility. And so if you want to support 2 people, you can, and more votes are actually counted in the race. So the next slide here is on cost effectiveness. So the first thing I'll point out is that with approval voting, you don't need any new machines or software. It's already compatible with what we use for plurality voting. The reason for this is because all of the software that's been developed is compatible with city council races where you can already fill in multiple bubbles. There are 3 seats or 2 seats up for election. So it's already able to count when multiple bubbles are filled in. You just change that max from the number of seats to be elected to the number of candidates in a race. So it already works really well that way. That's not true with ranked choice voting. There is a significant cost with that. Additionally, the ballot size stays the same with ranked choice voting because you have to list out the bubbles for what their ranking is and how many number of candidates are in the race. It actually fills up the entire page. We're used to using multiple columns. You have a race here and a race here. What that does is basically just makes each ballot 2 to 3 times longer. Under approval voting, because the only change is to that instruction line, the ballots look exactly the same otherwise. So there's no additional cost for mail-in voting and printing, which we heard was a significant cost increase for Salt Lake County, for instance, that used ranked choice voting for some of their cities. Additionally, voter education is extremely cost efficient and simple. You'll see on the right side here, there's some estimated costs for what voter education for approval voting and ranked choice voting would be based off the population in Centerville and some other cities that have used each of these methods. Under ranked choice voting, it would be about $23,000. Under approval voting, it's $7,600, so just about a third of the cost. Additionally, we're very passionate about approval voting, and so we'll be doing our own independent voter education, and it will be up to the city to see, how educated the voters are before they decide to how much you want to spend on voter
And Nate,
education.
there's nothing that precludes a municipality from doing an approval voting primary and general. Is there, or
That's correct.
or do you recommend just doing one?
I think that would be up to the city on what your interests are, but there is that possibility that you can eliminate it. Again, the main reason that we do primaries is to narrow the field down. So one reason that we do that is to eliminate vote splitting. So there's not as many people in that general election. But there are other reasons to do it as well, such as avoiding voter exhaustion from having to research too many candidates.
Yeah.
So that'd be up to the city.
And I would suppose it may matter depending on if there are 8 candidates versus 4 candidates.
Yeah, that's correct. And I think it would be up to the city to say if you choose to run a primary each year, or if you decide to eliminate it completely. But on that point, you can see what the cost savings here would be for Centerville. I know you didn't run a primary election in 2023, but in 2021, the cost was a little over $16,000. So that's a large potential cost savings for the city. Again, on voter education, one thing that we heard with ranked choice voting candidates is that they felt like they spent too much time explaining the method to their voters rather than talking about the issues that they were campaigning on. We haven't seen that with approval voting in other places that it's been implemented. Because it's such a simple change, you can just vote for me too. They can spend more time campaigning on the issues that they care about. Lastly, there's no additional cost for administration like ranked choice voting. This graph on the bottom left here was obtained from the county clerks in the state. It just showed what the cost would be for each city that opts in a county. The less cities, the higher the cost, obviously, but the more cities that opt in, you can split that cost. So under the ranked choice voting pilot project, it was a big deal for the city to be the first one to jump in because it would cost about $36,000. There's no additional cost. This graph is completely irrelevant under approval voting. And again, the reason for that is there's no need for new software, new voting machine licensing, ballot size stays the same, and all of those things. This next slide talks about where approval voting has been used. So internationally, it has been used for quite some time. Approval voting is essentially old as democracy itself. It was used in the ancient Greek legislature for a long time, but it's also been used in Venice, Italy, the papal conclaves where they elect a pope. And it's still currently used to elect the UN General Secretary. So it's widely used and understood and a very effective voting method. In the US, it's been used in 2 places so far, Fargo, North Dakota, and St. Louis, Missouri. I personally started this organization here in Utah. I've lived in Utah most of my life. And I'm just very passionate about seeing a good voting method that is most representative. And so we're hoping that Utah will be the next one to try this. On the right here is that exit polling that I mentioned earlier on approval voting in St. Louis. So you can see that people felt the instructions were clear. It was easily understood, easy to use. They were comfortable with it. They liked the increased expressivity. They liked approval in general. They wanted to expand its use. They felt it could increase turnout. And 49% of people did say the election was more positive. It's worth noting, that's not to say 51 said it wasn't more positive. 36 just felt like there wasn't much of a change. And that kind of makes sense. Elections are high stakes, so there might still be some mudslinging in elections, but in general, people felt like it was a little bit more positive. Going on to this last slide here, this is just comparison of the 3 major voting systems that have been discussed in Utah. So our current system, plurality voting, approval, and ranked choice. You can see that approval voting is the lowest cost among these 3. It produces the highest winning percentage. The voter satisfaction is very high. The ballot spoilage stays low. There's no new voting software. The ballot size stays small. The counting complexity is low. It is precinct summable, and the voter education is moderate. Of course, it is a change, so it's going to be a little bit of a hurdle to get that to explain that, but not as much as the complex ranked choice voting system. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Mr. Mayor, I will share that Curtis Coke and I had a conversation about this a couple of years ago when we were having discussions about considering ranked choice voting.
Yeah,
Curtis was adamantly opposed, and the challenges that go with this said, you're on your own if you want to do this. And we were talking about contracting with Utah County to do it because they were doing, anyway, it was absolute nightmare.
that was ranked choice.
Yeah, it was ranked choice
Yeah.
voting, but prior to that happening, he did mention approval voting is potentially the future, right? So I shouldn't say that. Curtis was talking about this is definitely a possibility if we're talking about alternatives. So I just want to share from our county, he was the clerk at the time, shared that approval voting is definitely a consideration for the future, far superior than ranked choice voting. That's his opinion, but, and I'm using his words, but anyway.
And
was a good chat.
yeah, in 21, that's the same thing he said to me. And I haven't reached out to Brian McKenzie now that Brian's over the election, but I'd be interested to see what his thoughts on it were as well too.
It sounds like all 29 counties are okay because it
That's
doesn't
right.
change their system at all.
Yeah,
Just
we've
great.
talked with Ricky Hatch, the president of the County Clerks Association, and he's relayed that all 29 are supportive and generally share that view. I haven't had a direct conversation with Brian in a couple of years now, so I won't quote anything from him.
It seems like such a simple system. Pick the number of people that you could support. I really like this person. I kind of like this person. I could live with this person, right? Those are the, and these other people on here, nope, I couldn't handle them. And it seems like then at least you're voting for somebody who you would support.
Yeah, exactly. And we would say it's arguably more simple than our current system, even because you can just say what you think about every candidate rather than having to narrow down strategically which one you're going to mark.
As a model United Nations delegate back in the day for the Science Day, we actually used approval voting for our own kind of voting. And anyway, so I have used it in our United Nations discussion.
Having watched the ranked choice voting try to be implemented at my caucus system, I much prefer this method. I think that it's very straightforward and it's common sense in the way that it's applied. I also like the idea that you could use it to eliminate a primary. I mean, that would save the city money.
Well, I would argue that
You still like
the
primaries?
voter fatigue, right? If you have 10 people
True.
campaigning, it does get challenging. So
But-
there still might need to be a but
but-
you can have more candidates available to move on to the next.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
You could set a
If you had
threshold.
12 and you want
Yeah.
to try and get down
And
to
that
8,
was,
You could set
that
a
was kind of what
threshold.
I was getting at is, I think you would set a primary dependent upon how many people
Right.
chose to run
Yeah.
at the total time.
create a policy around
Because
that.
if you had a lot of individuals running, I think you would want to give the public the opportunity to say, let's do a first round of approval choice and then do a second round as well.
Yeah.
I don't know that will happen, but I think there was 8 people that ran in 2021 before we got to the primaries. So,
Yeah, there was. There was
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm also supportive of anything that helps take out some of the mudslinging and the negativity when it comes to campaigning. I would much rather people focus on what they can do rather than attacking other people. And I'm supportive of a process like this because I think that it would help focus on the issues that matter rather than, trying to tarnish your opponent.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, increasing that time that a candidate can talk about their issues is important. And with other alternatives, that can be an issue. But because this is such a simple change, it makes a lot of sense to get all the benefits and not have to worry about those concerns with other methods.
If we chose to do that as a city, what is the process?
We can't yet.
Okay, we can't even do it?
No. The
Yeah,
Utah
the-
legislature doesn't allow us to do that. We can adopt, sorry, I'll let you talk, Nate.
No, you're fine. No, that's exactly right. The Utah legislature would essentially have to create a similar pilot program to the ranked choice voting one that exists right now, just to allow cities to opt in. And our hope is that cities would enjoy it and we could take it from there.
That's one reason why Curtis said he saw it as a thing of the future, because he thought someday it would be allowed.
So my question is, Nate, do you know any of the reasons that the legislature has given why they haven't approved it as of yet?
Sure. It's been a complicated past few years for elections. And I think they were not interested in touching any kind of change for a couple of years after the 2020 election, the national focus that was on elections. We have seen a lot more receptivity over the past year or so. And that's actually why we're doing this again right now, talking to cities. is that approval voting is likely to be a study item in the Government Operations Interim Committee over the next few months. And so the more city letters that we get, the more likely they are to recommend that for the general session to be voted on and create a pilot project in the next year or two.
Was the marketing ploy, get on it fast, because there's a lot of frustrated people after the state Republican convention.
Yes, yeah, that's, we could get.
More so than there's ever been, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
that's
yeah.
an issue.
So, any other questions? All right. Hey, thanks, Nate. It's educational, informative. I know all about ranked choice and regular voting, but approval, I hadn't had a presentation like that personally. So,
Yeah, happy to do it.
Really
Thanks again for having me,
appreciate it.
and I'll send over some additional information and example letters from other cities that have sent them so far.
Great.
thank you. All right, we're gonna do a little switch up really quick, a switcheroonie, because we probably will take a while on our comprehensive general plan discussion, and we got Deputy Fire Chief Greg Stewart here, and I don't know if you have another place to go or not tonight, Greg, but we'll flip down to the fireworks restriction area annual update, and Chief was going around to another city doing the same thing, I think, right? So,
Yeah, please.
so introduce yourself for everybody.
So if those that don't know me, I'm Deputy Chief Greg Stewart. I represent the administrative deputy chief position at South Davis Metro Fire. Chief Stone, like Mayor said, couldn't be here tonight because he's doing the same thing in North Salt Lake. So we're happy to be on the agenda. Thanks for having us. And we are just here to speak in favor and support of maintaining the restrictions the way that we have for the last few years. Not making any change to it. If you look at the stats that we've had since 2018, the public is getting the message, and they're having safe 4th of July's. And what we always try to push them to is a professional show to come to Centerville or North Salt Lake or West Bountiful to see fireworks instead of doing them at their homes, because typically, you know, the problems that we have are in really light fuels that burn quickly, hot, destroy property, and cause injury. So we're hoping to just maintain the status quo in that ordinance. So I'm happy to take any questions.
That's in your packet. Lisa, do you have any further input on it, or you're good this year?
No,
Still
I
changes.
appreciate the fire district coming each year and helping us support these regulations. Under statute, we have to show at least 2 years out of 5 that there's this environmental hazardous condition. We just do it every year, so we don't forget. So, but it's a good opportunity to remember that the fire season's coming, and as well as fireworks. And I thought maybe if you could just pull up the fireworks dates, just a nice thing to remember. These are the dates
These are the
that
permitted
you can
dates.
sell and discharge.
Yep. And we use these same dates to put on an extra patrol on the nights of these discharge dates to kind of go around and just kind of be in the area, be visible, go to trailheads, look for unattended campfires and fireworks violations and all that kind of stuff. So we kind of plan that around these dates as well.
So do these dates apply to commercial fireworks people?
No, I don't believe so.
Because you guys have said we could do our fireworks show on the 6th.
No, I think that's by special arrangement and permission.
Okay, and Chief said we could do it then. So
I heard
I
it
just
was the
started
other way
pan-
around.
Yeah.
Oh, do you know, Mayor, though, that may, you know, if we're gonna be doing fireworks on July 6th, though, it may merit reminding people like, hey, the city is doing it on July 6th, but that doesn't mean that you can do it
Yeah, good
on
point.
July 6th. Because I could see people going, oh, city's launching fireworks.
Yeah, I'm
Great,
gonna
I
do
can
it
go
too.
launch
Yeah.
mine.
Yeah,
Yeah, good point.
yeah, put that on our social media.
Yeah, us too. We'll put it on.
Price up there, yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, poke your head up. I'll convey the message.
Any questions, anybody about the map? I mean, it hasn't changed.
No, it hasn't changed. but
Great.
For new council members, we've had previous discussions about actually pulling that fire restriction even further to the west off the mountain. You know, for example, you could pull it as far down as like
400 east. But I think Chief Stone in the past said he's been comfortable with this map, so we just kind of kept it as is. If I remember
Yeah,
correctly.
yeah,
I think you're
they
right.
seem to be very, very comfortable with it, and the stats all show that it's working, so.
Well, I think we've had problems. They've been in restricted areas illegally, haven't they? So,
Yeah, you can't make people stop, but
yeah.
we do our best.
So, Lisa, you say we don't need any adoption, right? Because it's there. Do you want a motion on it to adopt it again?
No, it's just an opportunity to come and present the evidence to support the ordinance that we've codified. And we actually have our map and the dimensions in our code, so. There's no motion required.
Okay.
It's there, 2016.
It's printed on that.
Oh, printed.
It just said 2000.
It says
Yeah.
adopted by ordinance in 2018.
Yeah, 2018.
So at the bottom of it.
But
Yeah.
you'd like one for social media?
The common question we get every year is this the same act last year? Or is it different? And I think it's clear that underneath, like this restrictions area or wherever it's put, 2024.
Yeah.
Just so people know. Because we got to update the website anyways, everything anyways. So I think that's just something I would need to add. Especially when we put it on social media, people will see that this is 2024. More information.
We'll
Yeah.
put it on there forever and always, no questions.
But we don't need a motion to change that date, right?
No.
Okay.
That's just some question.
All right, Greg, since you don't get to come very often, anything else you want us to know about, with the summer fire?
I actually, when we're talking about fireworks, we're talking about wildfire. And I just wanted to give a kudos to the police chief back here because he's been actively engaged. When we talk about fireworks, it's always like we talk about rapid moving fire, people that are in harm's way. And I just finished reading the Maui after action report for the fires that they had over there. And Chief Child's been actively engaged with our wildfire evacuation zones and coming up with evacuation routes and stuff like that. So I can tell you from where I stand, not every police chief is that way. So I appreciate his active engagement in that project. And we've been working hard with forestry, fire, and state lands to come up with those zones. So we're prepared before something catastrophic happens. We can get people out of harm's way quicker. So special shout out. But that is all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Greg, for coming. All right, let's go to something that we've all been excited about, and that the committee that went through was excited about as well too. Our comprehensive general plan, and we're excited to present that to you. Mike has been excused tonight because it's his daughter's birthday, but Lisa and Bran and myself we're all involved, and Gina as well too on the committee. But so welcome.
Thank you.
Introduce yourself to all the rest of them. Where you're from?
I'm Chris Hupp. I currently live in West Jordan, like West Jordan. I've lived in Utah for 21 years now. Grew up in Independence, Missouri, but we've done general plans all over the Davis, Utah, Wasatch, Tooele, Salt Lake County. I'm very familiar with the code updates that the state keeps putting out, keeps cities on their toes. Nice and fun to see that come out every March. Do you mind pulling up the presentation?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
So yeah, that's me. And then also going to be helping in this effort. We have obviously Psomas, WCG, which has done quite a bit of work in Centerville and localities around here, and then Susie Becker from Zions Bank. That's the main part of the team. Obviously, Susie will be doing some of the economic and looking at the housing element, but we'll talk about that a little bit. So here's the general process, just to understand how this will flow. We're flexible. We can adjust and adapt this as needed by the city council and city in general. But our first element that we would do is we'd hold a kickoff meeting. In that, we would invite city staff, council member, planning commission member, usually are the individuals that we invite, and other key individuals or groups that are very involved in the city. So that'll be the first piece. We'll have ongoing coordination meetings from that point. Usually every other week, we'll jump into stakeholder interviews, which we do one-on-ones with a lot of the city council, planning commission, city staff, major groups, major employers, and other types of users that have interest in the city, in its current growth and development and historic preservation and other things of that nature. After we pull that together and look at some of the existing plans and data that we've been provided, then we jump into public engagement. We like to do our public engagement based around existing city events because my previous life, I did marketing for almost a decade and a half, ran my own company. I noticed that when we do events at city halls, we usually get a very specific demographic and a very, very small portion of that demographic. So we like going out to the places that are already being marketed, already being attended. We see the most feedback and research information from those types of events, and that's what we'll gear towards. Sounds like July 6th may be a good event for that, but we'll talk about that more. So that'll be that next piece. We'll do workshops with City Council, Planning Commission, joint meetings 4 times throughout this process, where we just keep you up to date as to what the vision is from the city and what we've been receiving, where we are in the process, and just keep you up to date as we go through this. Then we actually start working through these general plan elements based on the feedback and the existing conditions that we see. We start to develop those general plan elements also in accordance with state law and what's required in our general plans. We'll present a document in one of those work sessions just to go through the specifics of what we're proposing given the feedback that we've received, and then it'll come in front of City Council and Planning Commission for final approval. So just as an overview, as you may or may not know, there are several segments that have been updated over the last several years / decades. We will be updating all of those just so that you have a comprehensive general plan that fits today's context and information. As you can see, again, some of them have been a little bit more or a little bit longer timeline as far as when they've been updated. And as everyone knows, 2020, a few things happened that year. There's a little bit of different context today than there was even in 2019. So we'll look at some of those things as well, but everything again starts with the city's vision. So we'll update those elements, look at the historic preservation and other pieces, take the existing general plan elements and fold that into this updated document. Again, that will be happening over the next several months as we meet with the community, meet with you, and get that feedback. I touched a little bit on this already, but as far as public engagement, we start with the stakeholder interviews, again, with key demographics, including city staff, elected officials, to ensure that when we're looking through this information, we understand the issues that you all see as well. Obviously, you know a little bit more than most residents do in the city as far as what the major issues are, and we want to know those to start with, so we're not pushing something that residents may want to support but can't be feasible or supported by the city. So we'll go through that. Then we jump into those community events. We also have a project website, which will have a social mapping software involved in it. And basically what that means, it allows residents to, I'm going to use a little terminology here, geolocate comments. That's like, I can put a comment on my house and say, please leave this house alone, or whatever it might be. I can locate those comments or images or ideas based on wherever it is. And that can be on transportation, on land use, on open space, and different things. There was a gentleman earlier, he talked about having a dog park. That could be a comment that he places exactly where you potentially want that to go. We also run traditional surveys, both digital and physical, so that we try and reach all demographics and all digital abilities. And then we'll do visual preference surveys, which include the ability to get feedback and ideas from children up to whenever. The next slide, please. So the first element that we like to address, and transportation, economics, and land use are heavily involved. They're very dynamic in that when land use changes, economics change, transportation changes, and so on. So if transportation changes, land use is going to need to change as well to make sure that they all flow together and meet the needs of what you all are seeing. So as we go through this, we work with WCG and Zions Bank to ensure what this land use meets existing city needs, including moderate income housing, and the other elements that we're going to be looking at, specifically where the areas are where there could be some redevelopment or economic growth in the city.
What do you mean by the small area studies? Maybe you're getting into that. Or is that more like specific plans?
Yeah,
versus general plans?
So you'll see like
or site specific, or are we talking about neighborhood specific, or it could be a combination?
Could be a combination. Okay. So we'll look at different areas within or neighborhoods or nodes within the city that may be more advantageous for economic growth, and others that residents want to keep or leave alone. For example, you've got Main Street. A lot of residents don't want that to change. They want it to stay more or less the way that it is. We'll get into that. We'll look at those things and really dig into the future small area studies that need to be had specifically for the economic growth component. Does that answer that question?
Good answer.
Perfect. We also will look at the existing district maps that are currently in the general plan and see if there's needing for revision to those, or if those districts need to change or adjust or grow or shrink.
What you don't know is the council member Summerhays has said before that as much as I love our Main Street, I also believe it's the least attractive Main Street in Davis County. So
that's not to say that there's nothing that we can't change with any of these.
No, that's the purpose of
having
stakeholder meetings, citizen input, etc.
Exactly. And I don't want to misspeak. I don't know what the vision is yet because we haven't met with the residents and everything. So once we do that, we'll figure out what those things are. And then update those accordingly. Moderate income housing. The main thing with this, obviously you've had to update it every single year for the last several. We're going to look at this and make sure that it continues to meet the existing needs from legislative updates and other things. See if there's anything that we can tweak or adjust to make it easier for the city to maintain and upkeep. Again, we'll just look at those city goals, existing goals, and see, given the vision of residents and staff and elected officials, if there's anything that may need to be modified to keep in line with your vision. Transportation access management. Again, WCG has worked with Centerville on a few different projects. Going back to that economic component, there may be some developmental potential on the west side of the city, and as you may know, there's some difficult access management over there. 1 to 2 ways in and out of some of those areas. For good economic growth, you want great transportation networks. And so we'll look at some of those. Obviously, we'll look at the rest of the city as well, but that's just one example of what we'll be doing to try and make sure that this transportation, multimodal transportation network fits your needs. And then economic development. Obviously, there's key nodes. Zions has done some studies and understands a lot of the existing data that's here. They're going to dig a little bit deeper into that to try and understand these are key areas that we can focus on. For example, in our presentation that we did, which obviously you heard some of those pieces. I know some of the rest may not have been disseminated, but we looked at the percentage of economic growth in the different nodes or commercial nodes of the city. Where is the most commercial coming from? Maybe those are the areas that we focus on first and adjust those or fix those or help those continue to grow. And then we can start to adjust our focus as it continues on. That's part of what we'll be looking at. There's quite a bit of other pieces that we look at for the economic development. And then this last piece, sustainability includes the slope areas, corridors. Obviously, the fire chief just talked about some of our fire hazard potentials. We look at those things to try and make sure that certain maintenance happens in these areas to protect against future issues. That includes flood areas, that includes slope, creek corridors, heat island landslide risk, and other things in that area. One of the big pieces of this as well is the water element. Water element is now a requirement. We've been doing the water elements for general plans for at least a decade before they even required them as far as what cities would need to do, because we've seen it as being a very key and crucial piece of cities and what we are in Utah. So we'll look at that. We'll provide background solutions and other things to potentially help or look at the incentives that are existing for state funding to help out with some of the projects, and both in terms of the city and resident projects where they can potentially get funding to flip their strip or some of the other items that are out there. So we'll look at those items, make sure that they meet state requirements, but more importantly, meet city needs. That's that. Pretty quick. I was told to keep it concise and then open for questions.
I am impressed you came up with a whole new PowerPoint from when we met with you before.
Yeah. Yeah. Keep them going.
You had a general schedule, which was more process oriented. Do you have a feel for actual month schedule, like a range of schedule? I'm not suggesting that we're holding you to this, but is it a year-ish schedule? Is it an 18-month schedule? Is it a 24-month schedule?
We had it a little bit tighter. In talking with Mike, we've adjusted it slightly to go into April of next year, specifically because, again, the legislative session ends in beginning of March. So if anything critical happens, we don't want to leave you with a brand new general plan and you already have to update it.
Thank you.
It's not a great thing to do. So we've pushed it a month to make sure that we can address any of those things or make adjustments as needed or may be needed. You never know at this stage.
Thank you.
Good question. Other questions?
I'm very impressed.
Thank you. We're excited. Susie Becker, who you saw on the slide, she lives close by and she shops here and she loves Centerville. I'm a little bit further away, so I don't shop up here. But
We might require that.
Sorry, what?
We might require.
We'll have you shop when you do your visits.
I had lunch or dinner here before I came, so.
And also, the WCG are consultants on our parish, 400 West Parish line. So we're currently working with them and they're great to work with. They keep us on task. We have regular meetings. They're great to work with.
And here's their timeline that's in the proposed.
Oh, thank you.
And again, that's flexible. If we need to adjust or it needs to go longer because certain things come up, that's understandable. We're flexible. Any other questions?
Let me just say what Chris's team presented. I loved their enthusiasm and their uniqueness in the approach, and it seemed like your team had a great understanding of the process as well too, and in our city.
we've been working in the city and around the city, and we understand a lot of what's going on. We also understand the state and what's going on. I currently serve as the American Planning Association Programs Director, and so we're constantly doing programs to try and help cities facilitate some of the needs and things that they have. Because not every city has the availability of funding, and so we're actually doing a workshop for the water elements of cities, and people can sign up to go to those. We'll also have a land use and moderate income housing workshop in, I believe that's July, but there's a few of those sessions coming up. So we're well engaged in all these different happenings.
Thanks. So if there's no other questions for Chris, I will turn us to the professional service agreement. And if I was listening right, is there still some adjustments to make to it, Lisa, or is it pretty good for them, for council to approve it, or?
Pretty good.
Okay.
There's one
Pretty
item
good
I
doesn't
believe-
exude a lot of confidence.
What can we do to get to really good?
Yeah, so we have the professional services agreement before you to actually enter into an agreement with Psomas to prepare our comprehensive general plan. And the terms of that agreement are for $129,500 for those services. And they are, I think the projection, if you had just said, is 11 months. We did extend that a little bit and also extended it a little bit to include the planning commission. I think it's important for the council and the planning commission to get together as well. So I appreciate Mike Eggett, community development director, adding those terms. But so they sent us over a professional services agreement, their standard one. We sent back a number of red line changes, and they've agreed to all of them but one. So for instance, they had that they could renegotiate the rates after 12 months, but they did take that out. They were going to charge us 12% interest on our bills. We got that down to 5%. They wanted us to pay their cost if they had to testify. We got that taken out. And we did have a specific provision that this will be interpreted pursuant to Utah law. Psomas is a California company, so we wanted to be specific about the jurisdiction and venue also in Davis County or in Utah if it's a federal case. And we added some provisions about immunity and government records and even our own budget appropriation clause. And then the Nate boycotting clause is in there as well because it's over.
Oh, the Nate clause. Oh, geez.
The Nate
Not
clause.
sure what that is, but yeah.
The legislative.
So the last provision that we're dealing with is just an indemnification clause, and our standard clause is just to have them hold us harmless and indemnify us and actually pay for any attorney's fees for any of their negligence. They would like to, this is the one sticking point, they just want this clause to say that they will indemnify and hold the city harmless against all third-party damages caused by their negligence. I haven't had an opportunity to talk with their attorney about the position on this. I think with a general plan, it's sort of a low risk. We also did get their insurance rates up, but their damages clause says that which is very common now with these service agreements, is their damages are limited to the contract amount, which is $129,500. So we also got in, well, our damages are limited to specific performance, which means we're actually not going to pay you anything. We will just do what we said we were going to do. So I think those are balancing limitation of liability under a general plan provision. So I'm actually okay if you're, if we just get the indemnification against third parties, but I'm also willing to go back and try to negotiate something more where at least they can hold us harmless for any of their claims against us. But,
on that note, our corporate attorney did litigation in LA for like 25 years, and so he's looking at it in those terms. I'm like, dude, this is Centerville, Utah, like not LA, please. please. Come on.
And
And
I
it's a
do
general
think-
plan.
I do think some of that is coming because of the E&O insurance now. Like I know with our company in particular, they are requiring certain language about indemnification with cities.
Yeah,
I can't for certain say, the nuances there, but I do know that has become a little more common in the contracts just because that's what E&O insurance is required.
Okay, yeah, that's good insight.
So,
I'm okay, but I'm also willing if the council wants to direct staff to, approve it subject to staff renegotiating that clause to the extent we can, or just approve it with their provision in section 8.1. But other than that, I think we're pretty good.
I find it bizarre that they're not willing to indemnify based on their own negligence. I have to admit, that strikes me as.
That, yeah, and it would be nice to just talk to them directly, but I didn't get the opportunity. So if you want me to make a phone call.
I'm not an attorney, so I'm like,
Yeah.
whatever. So
And-
I can set up that call for tomorrow so that they can chat and work through that if that's.
I think it's a remote possibility, but I still think it's a pretty standard term. I would be inclined to make the phone call. It makes me wonder why. And if they're not willing to do it, I would like to know why.
I'd like to see the phone call made.
Happy to do it.
so will we delay until that, then you'll bring it back to us then?
I would be
I think we
okay
can make a
approving it,
motion to
yes.
approve it, subject to.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay,
I think as long as Lisa's comfortable with
And
what.
say, we're not
give staff some
affecting your
discretion.
bargaining power, I guess.
Well, just make sure that the clause that you wanted out is, understanding why. It may just be that.
Well, and that's why I don't want to take a firm position in the approval. I think we can leave that to the discretion of staff. And if staff feels like they need to bring it back to us, they can bring it back to us. But I think we can approve it subject to. How do you feel about that, Lisa?
That's good.
okay. Motion? For approval? Motion for approval?
I'll make a motion to approve the professional services agreement with Psomas for the comprehensive general plan updates, providing also flexibility to staff, specifically on legal language related to indemnifications and other provisions that they feel are important to include or negotiate on our behalf.
Second.
A motion is second. Let's roll call it. Councilman Nickam.
Aye.
I,
All right, that's unanimously. Thanks, Chris, for being here.
Thank you.
We're looking forward to having you interview us all.
Yeah. We'll be seeing each other a lot.
Okay. All right, let's go to item under business items number 3 on the agenda. This is a recreation fund programs and fees. And
recycling.
You can skip it. It's okay.
did I not get an updated agenda?
It's on the bottom of the first page. It's split between both
I
pages.
printed this out just before the meeting. Okay, we'll go to recycling then.
Is it not on yours?
Interesting.
It's
Number
not,
3?
so, yeah, I see it on the screen. So let's do glass recycling discussion. Discuss various options for glass recycling dumpsters. Brad?
I will take this on. Mike is unable to be with us tonight, so I'll try to channel my inner Mike. So we'd start this by saying, I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm just kidding. So I'll do my best. Mike has done the legwork on this, but we've had multiple conversations on how to proceed with the options for glass recycling. Mike has done a great job reaching out to a number of potential vendors and doing a lot of research. So you can see in this document, the 3 options that are available. I really feel like there's 4 options, but I really feel like there's 3. So the first option, we met with Momentum. Momentum was great to work with. I reached out to them and they had some pricing. When Mike reached out to Momentum, like, well, you should contact who's ever providing your collection right now and see what rates they provide. So that's what Mike did. He reached out to Ace Recycling. Their options are extremely limited, and this is the most costly option of them all. We have to get a 30-yard container, which seems overdoing it for glass, unless you're picking it up once every 3 years. So But that, it's $300 per month, $430 each time we dump it. At first they said, well, you're gonna have to dump it once a month regardless of how much is in there. So the yearly rental is $3,600 with tipping fees of $2,150. So $5,750 per year to go with the 30-yard dump. So that's through Ace Recycling. So we reached back out to Momentum and said we didn't like that option. And they came back with a couple other options for us. Option one is probably my favorite and recommended, and I'll go through this. It's a 15-yard doghouse style roll-off container, a little bit smaller again, maybe overdoing it, maybe too much. It's their standard public drop-off size. It's a roll-off, would range in $7,000 to $8,000. So we are actually going to be required to purchase that. We'll own it instead of renting it. So there's going to be a pretty sizable upfront cost. And then Mike had the idea of why don't we paint it and get a Centerville theme painting on it. That's where maybe we can engage our student to help find that person to paint. And he estimated maybe $500 for that mural to be painted on that dumpster. So that total startup cost $8,500, but based on the tipping, that's only about $1,000 a year. So again, a little bit more reasonable to provide this service to the residents. And then we need to work with Mike Agate. We're not quite sure, according to our code, if we're gonna have to put down a cement pad and fence it to make it a little bit more secure, because really that's part of our code. We do that with all of our dumpsters.
So I was chatting with Mike about complying with our code. And then after thinking about it, I still want to comply with our code, but as it relates to the fencing, how do we still have it easily accessible? Is it a fence in terms of a screening fence? It's not a keeping people out, because we want people to be donating or putting in their glass. So when we talk about a fence, what does that look
That's
like?
the question.
Okay.
So I think there's some opportunity to negotiate whether you keep 3 sides are fenced in, and maybe there's an opportunity to leave that front open, or whatever that
Or if
case
it's a
might be.
piece of art that's painted, it shouldn't be fenced and
Potentially.
obstructed.
That's what I
Yeah.
was thinking.
So
Okay.
potentially. So we'll have those conversations. But again, we're
Call
just
it a public art
anticipating.
installation.
What would be the benefit of fencing it on 3 sides?
What, not at all.
Screening.
It's the question is if our code requires it, are we going to follow our own code? And I
Right, so
think
dumpsters need to be like our dumpsters.
knowing
here at City
Lisa,
Hall
she's going
are
to say,
enclosed.
I prefer if we follow our own code if we're gonna require our citizens.
You're channeling your inner Lisa.
Absolutely.
What
Yeah.
if we install, wait, hold on, but what if we install an artwork?
Correct, and that's where I'm going, is if it's then painted in art.
Is it a dumpster or is it art?
So again, just be mindful that there tends to be near these dumpsters, glass that doesn't make it all the way. And you have glass shards all over potentially. You
Okay,
have
that's fair.
potentially a mess that you may want to hide from public view. So again, we'll explore the options. We'll come back with a recommendation, but just be aware that, we budgeted 10,000 and this cost is potentially up near 15,000 for this route
So
upfront.
I'm all for recycling the glass. But I look at some of the things we need and I just think $15,000 is a lot of money for recycling the glass. And I'm not sure how much glass we're gonna recycle. Like I said, I talked to Bill and a few of the people that just had the smaller recycles and they didn't fill up in months. They couldn't fill up one. And so I'm concerned. And then we are charging the people for the garbage and for our recycle now so that we're breaking even. We're not putting money into that recycle program. Do we really want to start putting $15,000 into a recycle program? I mean, like I said, I'm all about recycling and I have my boxes in my garage. So I don't want to come across as not recycling. I'm just not sure for $15,000. I personally have very little glass. So I'm concerned that that's a lot of money for us to be donating. I mean, would we rather have the concession stand open at the ballpark? Would we, I mean, there's a lot of things we could do for $15,000 that would maybe serve more people than the glass recycle.
Well, that's a different fund. So, but yeah, to your point, that is the conversation we've had as staff is this is quite a bit when the options available. If I can go through the options.
Yeah, you
real
have
quick.
options. You have options. that
We're
are
not done with our other.
Yeah, let me
I
just
I thought
finish
we
these
were
other
done
quick-
with our options.
No, we're
right?
not.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
it's cheaper options.
option 2 is a glass pod. Could be the most cost-effective options, these shares. It's basically 4 bins. This is on the next page. So 8 bins locked to a metal base, maybe the best way to go. $3,000 to buy 8 bins. Startup cost is $4,000, an annual cost of $1,000. So the first year would cost $4,000, provided we don't do any fencing. Again, if we do need fencing, we don't think we need fencing in this situation. But again, that's
The
about
picture just shows
$1,000.
a bay of 4, correct?
So that's,
We
yeah,
have
so
to
that's
buy
kind of their pot. The glass pot is not glass per se, it's glass containers.
Right, no,
It's a
I'm
pot
sorry.
of 4 containers that
Correct.
are available to the residents.
Yeah, but this proposal is for 8 bins, not 4 bins, correct?
Yeah, so there'd be 8 bins.
Does it come
Does
with
it
a
come-
cool little sign?
Yeah, that's my next question. Does it come with the sign?
Or that's just the green bins?
We would need to purchase the sign.
Is this the, so the bins that I'm seeing in the picture, is this the size that Momentum has for the residents? They're really tiny.
So they are, the ones for the residents are really tiny.
Are these bigger than that?
These are bigger than those. Those ones are really skinny.
They're really, yeah,
Mhm.
this is more like our recycling bin size, I'm guessing.
Now, do you have one of the Momentums?
Do I?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And do you find that you fill it or your neighbors fill
Yeah,
it?
but I have, family members that really like the bottled soda, so we go through a lot of that, so. Yeah.
So you're doing your part by recycling. So that's great.
Well,
That's
because
awesome.
we were doing this, I canceled it, so I just barely had them, they just barely took it away, but if we don't do this, I'll go back to recycling, but they were.
And the third option is just that. We have a really great program with Momentum, and we encourage more to do that, and maybe even encourage neighborhoods, just as Bill Ince was doing, that all the neighborhoods can do it. Doing the math, Nate, I was looking, we could subsidize or fund $1,000 worth to put them in certain neighborhoods and say, you own it, and we'll take a credit off your bill. I'm not arguing that should be the case, but you could create these opportunities and encourage residents to be a part of it instead of us funding one central location where really we're not in the recycling game, and creating a structure to support the recycling just adds some added work. So there's ways we can encourage recycling and support our good friend. Remind me of her name, Councilwoman. Allie, to support what her cause is, where we can get more engaged in market creating opportunities versus us actually owning the recycling container itself. I think there's opportunities there, but we just want to get this before you. And of course, we'll go with whatever direction council would like us to go with glass recycling. Just a reminder, we have 10,000 in the budget, in the sanitation budget to support this.
I kind of agree with Robin a little bit that it does seem like it's getting a little bit expensive, especially considering that we do have, my opinion is I would try to be really good to bring my glass recycling to the location, but it's really a lot easier to just dump it in my own bin.
Yeah,
my
I think
house.
having it in the neighborhood is a way better idea. I mean, I don't know how many people you're gonna get to load it up and drive it to the.
You have one location like the option one, people close by. I just don't think that thing's gonna get much glass in it at all.
That's what I'm worried about.
The cost benefit, what relationship there, I just don't think it's gonna be there.
I want to support Ally, and maybe we could do some things in our newsletter and different things to try and encourage the recycling, but
Remind me how much you pay a month for your
$8.
$8.
So I just took the 15,000 and said, how many residents would that, it's 156 residents a year, it's 156 of those bins essentially. I'm not opposed to looking at option 2 and maybe it's a lot less,
That's where I'm leaning. I mean, I'm kind of,
like, try it. And if it doesn't work,
I was
we're
thinking
not
that
out
this would be a far
as-
smaller
yeah.
dumpster type of a thing, not a massive full parking stall
Yeah,
size of a
Yeah.
dumpster.
yeah.
And so that's why I'm asking. So you're paying $8 a month, so about $100 a year.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
how many of our
yeah,
citizens are
exactly 100.
using the glass? Do we?
I don't have
a
those
number on
numbers. No. I
It
know
would
we,
be interesting to know how
pretty
many
good
people have
participation.
them.
Mike may have it, maybe even Nate has it. No. Yeah, so that's separate accounting for us, so right, doesn't even come through our billing. It's
Right.
directly billed from them.
It would be interesting to me to know how many people have them and how often they're having them
But
dumped.
if it's $1,000 in tipping a year, that's just 10 residents. Now, yes, you have to buy the initial setup cost, but I can imagine there's more than 10 people in the city that are that are either have their recycle bins or benefit from it, and or we would get better participation from it. I save up my glass. It's like a month or every 2 month drop, and I have to go to Target.
Okay, you're taking yours to Target.
Yeah, because I don't know where else to take it. I guess I can take it to your house.
So is it
Well, except
outside?
for I just canceled my
I
bin, but I
know.
would
No,
love it
I'm-
if you came, because
It's a bit facetious, but
even though we did fill up that bin, like we didn't always send it out to the curb
Right.
every month.
and I was just
Like,
doing the
and
quick
I feel like
calculation.
we do
is
use quite a bit of glass.
That's 10 residents is $1,000. To me, I think there's more than 10 residents
That
that
would
could
use
benefit
it.
from it. So we're just discussing the one-time setup cost. So
So are we doing the same thing Target's doing now? Just. give
Yeah,
it-
what's,
it's
if
another
Target's doing what
location
we
to go
want to
to?
do, why?
Target's is very small. It's not super,
But it's there.
it's there.
And
No,
if
I'm
people
not-
aren't using it, why are they gonna use ours?
Are they using it?
That-
Maybe they
that's what
are.
I'm
Because
saying.
maybe it's easier just to drive up and dump your stuff off into the.
But that, is that what Target's is?
No,
No,
it's
'cause you have to,
inside
like,
the
take it
store.
Oh, it's inside.
And when
the
I go inside
store.
the store, it's halfway full each time I go in. People use it.
Be interesting to talk to Target and see how often they're dumping it.
So here is my thought. I actually circled option 2 in my paper because that was the option that I leaned towards. It's uglier, but it's also more cost effective. And I know that Ally went out and raised money to try to put towards this. And if we put the money that she raised towards the $3,000 to buy 8 bins, it feels like a small initial input. Give it a year and see. Let's see how people do, right? Maybe they use it, maybe they don't. And if they don't use it, we're not out a ton. And I guess we have some extra green bins.
And I would say that the council led her to believe when she was here and she left that this is kind of a done deal. And I think, I'm not saying that is a handcuff to this council, because if somebody had come to us and said, well, it's gonna be $15,000 to do this, and it's going to be an annual cost of another $1,000, it would have been, whoa, okay, that's different. However, on option 2, to me, that made more sense. And those are bins that can be used because we own them. Let's just see how it plays out. And if you can save your residents that money, Gina, would you still collect your glass and bring it over here to City Hall? I think it's more convenient
Here's
than
what
have to park at Target,
yes,
drive it, which I already do. So
100%.
maybe I'm saying this selfishly because this would be far more convenient for me personally.
But one of the reasons I did cancel my bin is because I knew we were spending quite a bit of money, and I was like, well, if the city's gonna do this, I wanna support what the city's doing.
Exactly.
But in this case, I'm like, well, I could still have my bin if I want to, or I can try this way and see if it works.
I think
But I
the
do think you'd get a really good idea if
I
it,
think people that will find out that they have this at City Hall will say, oh, great, I can cancel my subscription because this is already part of my budget within the Centerville City context.
I mean, in an ideal world, would I love the cute little artwork type bin that this photo is in our pocket? Absolutely, right? Like I would love to celebrate it a little more than sort of this ugly garbage can, but it's not worth $10,000 to have that cute little artwork. So although I think we should figure out how to do one of these cool little like sign things or something so that it's not like, I think that we need to make it identifiable as what it is, as opposed to just throwing out some green garbage cans.
maybe that sign could have some artwork to it. I mean, I know I agree with you. It's not cute like the artwork thing, but maybe there
You can
could be
paint it.
some element of,
We bought the bins. You can paint them to look like cans. Soda cans. Hey, why not?
I like it.
No, thank you.
I've seen these bins in use before. And they do tend, the ones that I've seen, get glass strewn about. People don't make it, and picking up the glass at that point after it's broken becomes difficult. So I would absolutely want to cover even an artwork large bin. It's going to be at a certain point unsightly. And this option 2, less expensive, yes, and we did say that we would try this out. But I look at that and I still see something that would need to be removed from site, possibly because of garbage and glass that's going to be strewn about.
You're not wrong on that at all. Even with, us carefully, I mean, we were not trying to ever drop glass at all, but we did have, like, I had to go out with the broom every so often and sweep it up because it just sometimes, I don't know, my kids missed. They're lazy.
It's going to happen. And we're not talking just kids, we're talking everybody. And
Yeah, I think you'd probably have potentially less care in some situations. So yeah, I think you would have to plan that there would have to be some cleanup and or some way to screen or protect it so that it's taken care of that way.
I still think it's worth trying.
I
And
agree.
And if we hate it after a year or two, and it's a big eyesore, and it's a mess, and it's hard to maintain, then we get rid of it. But I think that it's worth giving it a try.
And those bins can be used at community park or multiple parks around here. It's not like we will lose those bins. So,
But I would like to find some way to advertise to people what it is. Like if we cover it or whatever, I want people to know easily where to go to find it. Because I mean, that is the one benefit of this picture. Again, that whole thing is hideous, but I know exactly what it is.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, so we'll leave the $10,000 in the budget, but the recommendation is option 2. So we will explore option.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
That's great. That's great direction. Thank you. Anything else?
I'm waiting for the minutes to see that I've called this hideous.
No sense.
All right, let's go to recreation fund program fees. Come on up.
oh,
Yeah.
All right, I do have just some paperwork for y'all.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, I got it. Cookie Man.
Sweet. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex.
This is awesome.
All right,
doing dodgeball.
so we did kind of make some
Some of those do that.
major
New this year, I
adjustments,
think.
some minor, some major adjustments to our budget. So kind of the first thing, looking at summer fees, the big change, and that might actually be, oh, thank you. In with our off-site instructors. So we aren't having any third-party registration going through us this summer. It's only our in-house stuff. We do have one rugby, but none of the tumbling or dance going through us. So you'll see that change reflected in the budget. Also, our
Haley, can I just ask why are we including rugby? Already agreed to it or?
yeah, we
Okay.
already had them.
It's totally fine. I
Yeah.
just wondered.
Yeah, they haven't had a lot of interest, so we'll see what happens with that. So that's kind of a major thing with our instructors. Next is our, if you want to look at the concessions. So we did not run concessions this spring. We were kind of just deciding what to do. We did put out a request for proposals and we did have one secured, but it just didn't work out with what was going on. So we didn't provide concessions at all this season. So that obviously we weren't buying any stock, we weren't staffing it, we weren't paying for staff for that. So that's a major change.
How was that? Like, what was the feedback? Were there people that were extremely irritated or moderately dissatisfied because it was an inconvenience?
They mostly, I just got questions like, oh, is concessions opening this season? And we just kind of said, oh, we were trying to get, you know, a contractor in here, it didn't work out, so we're not able to open this year. And they were like, oh, okay.
Okay.
But we
So
did have
even-
people that were asking about it. They were interested if we were gonna open it.
I had a few phone calls of very disgruntled people.
What was your response?
I called them, and found out why, and tried to tell them that due to the fact that it lost money last year, we tried to go to a third party vendor, and that had fallen through at the last moment, and so we would be reevaluating it. And they, you know, hoped that we would be having it again. I mean, they said they, you know, a lot of parents go down there at 5 o'clock, and if you've got 2 or 3 kids, you're there from 5 till 8, and they have no way of feeding their kids a cheap hot dog or a, you know, something like that. I think I'd call Brian. I think he's got more input than I do. He spends way more time at the ballpark than I do. I can't say I've been there this year, so I'll turn the time over to Brian.
Well, I've been down there and it has been a little bit of a vacuum, and sometimes in a vacuum, you know what happens? It gets filled. I have seen a couple of people just set up shop and start selling things on a table or things like that, just water or ice cream, or somebody tried to set up a cotton candy machine, you know, and sell that, but that didn't work out. I guess the machine was broken, but those things will happen when you don't provide something. And I can't say that I didn't go up and inquire what their prices were, because I was interested, you know, so.
Did they have their appropriate permitting from the county?
That is actually
Absolute
something that
Doubtful?
I
I
would
don't
not
know.
think so. I did not ask. I only saw one of those scenarios, and we don't allow commercial sales in
Yeah,
our
it's irrelevant what
parks.
the county says, we don't know.
Yeah. I was gonna
Yeah.
say.
Well,
Yeah,
So it
agreed.
goes right against.
And as far as the county goes, I'm just talking about that they,
Health
if
code.
you're, yeah,
You're
this is
talking
just
about,
the
right?
health department, not
health
even.
department.
I
whether
don't
or
know
not
if
it's-
they're, I think they're selling like
probably-
soda pop cans and things like that. I don't think
Not
it was
necessarily.
they weren't
Cars or
fixing
something like that. I mean,
food. They
They're-
were
they're
just
wrapped.
selling.
They
They're wrapped.
still have to have a, I think it.
I don't think you have a food
Not for
handlers.
Not for wrapped food, you don't need a food handler.
Cotton candy you do.
Cotton candy, you
So-
Yeah,
don't.
cotton
Yeah.
candy you would have to,
Yeah.
but I think the other, they probably wouldn't have to. But like I said, I think it's hard to not be able to even get a soda pop down there for 3 or 4
Oh,
hours.
candy bar.
I couldn't agree more on that. I didn't spend a ton of time at the ballpark because I just didn't have kids that played baseball, but the summers that I did, it was very nice to have the concessions. So and it's because of exactly what you said. I was dragging a couple of toddlers with me to those games.
Well, and your husband
You
comes
can't-
straight from work and
Yeah.
meets you at the ballpark.
And you can't leave your little kid at the ballpark in the middle of this game to go get food. So I completely am not unsupportive of, I mean, Brian brings up a good point that you create a vacuum that.
I don't want to necessarily subsidize it. I mean, I feel like it needs to take care of itself, but
Here, in my mind, and this is just in my mind, when I talked to Bryce and Haley early on, what it was, the hope was to have a contractor that would come in, because we were not able to, we were closing it down early anyway and getting complaints because we couldn't work kids. They were what, 14 in there or something? We couldn't work them past 7 o'clock. You know, and the parks go until 8. One park might be going until 8:30 or 9. It has lights on it. So there was just a limited time it was open anyway. And I love the idea of pursuing it. A
Well, the
vendor.
other thing
we
I
just
wondered-
didn't get one. And
right.
so
Other thing I
we
wondered,
couldn't, we can't provide the service doing ourselves anyway, unless we come up with,
right.
so, and you employ a 16-year-old, they're gonna want $25 an hour, you know?
Well, that's what I said. Our
So-
other thing is, we've discussed through the years that there are kids that can't play baseball because it's too expensive. And especially if you've got 4 little boys or 5 little boys, and, you know, it gets really expensive. Would it pay to have parents that could man it for their kids getting to play baseball? I mean, the Lagoon lets the parents go up there and work for a couple of months for a season pass for their kids. Would it pay to have some parents in there and give them a discount or whatever on their kids' baseball so that you could do one adult and 2 kids for what you could do 6 kids for? I mean, if you had an adult in there running it, you wouldn't need to have the amount of kids that they have in there, and then they can stay. I know after, if you're not over 16, you can't work after, I think it's 7 o'clock, but if you had an adult in there running it, you could do that.
In theory, that sounds really good, and I like that idea. But I bet you could get Haley and Bryce to comment on how hard it is to get volunteers, even if there is a financial incentive, such as for coaches. I believe that they did offer, was it offered at one point for their child to play for free or at a
A
discount?
discount.
And you still end up short on coaches at times. So I don't know. Would you think that it would be difficult to find that type of a volunteer? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to that, but I mean, always volunteers are difficult to find and train and manage. So it would, have its own problems. I think the bigger picture here is we wanted to try it and see what it was like without concessions. And luckily I wasn't on the receiving end of the angry stuff, Robin, so thank you for fielding those. But yeah, there is an overall, it's a nice feeling and a nice atmosphere when it's open. It's, creates a more alive thing. And it's a question of, is that important to us? Is that something we want to be able to provide? And do we need to go the route of getting creative and running it ourselves? Or do we need to secure and find a vendor earlier? Because that was something we were doing kind of late in the game. And that is kind of why it fell apart. So if it's a priority that we absolutely provide something, we can look at the different levels of that. I think that is the question. So we did try it without. It seemed okay. There's advantages to having it open, of course. There's advantages to not as well. We've also discussed ideas of bringing in food trucks and things like that. So there's other creative ways to provide if that's a priority to us as well.
I'd rather have a third place vendor. I mean, you can't control their prices, but food trucks are pretty expensive to feed your family of 5 or 6.
They are expensive, and maybe you guys have checked into this further, but it seems like when our companies tried to bring them into events, you have to spend a minimum, and I'm thinking that might be cost prohibitive. I could be wrong, but
yeah. Well, and their prices are reflecting that they need to make a profit, right?
Yes.
And we were losing money on ours, so
yeah.
there's a balance for sure.
Do you think, I have no idea what you were charging for items at this point.
So page 3.
Oh, sorry, thank you.
Yeah.
Maybe we could get Costco to come do hot dog.
So watching, as you're looking, and watching Bryce try to manage this a few years ago, that whiteboard right there had 30 kids' names on it. So he's trying to coordinate all their schedules when they're available, and we're at the end of the school year. So if you can imagine the high school students and all their commitments and all this. So Bryce was just trying to piece it all together. So you hire more kids than you actually need, and you have to keep them busy enough to justify them, being on the schedule. Since again, this is one of the disadvantages of our programs, is that we're not a full rec program. We have baseball, and we only need the kids for a short period of time. So keeping kids for where we can say, thanks for doing concessions here. Now I need you to ump over here and ref basketball over here. And these kids, particularly in Layton, right? They shift and move responsibilities pretty easily, and you keep them employed and engaged all year long. We just need you for 6 weeks. Come in and then you move on. So again, that's the kind of challenge of maintaining and keeping.
And I will say, in a full-fledged rec center at South Davis Rec Center, we made the decision to close down concessions because we were losing money. We went out to a third-party RFP to a vendor. We secured a vendor. They lasted 6-9 months, and they said we can't make any money. So to me, there hasn't been any decrease in participation at the rec center because we don't have concessions. I don't know if we've had or will have any decrease in participation in baseball because we don't have concessions. I think that's frankly probably the best metric. Like, why do we have concessions? To complement our baseball season. And if you don't lose participants because you don't have concessions, that says it was nice to have, but it's not critical to have.
I'd like to find
That's my
way to make
That's a
it
good
profitable or get a third party person to work. Difference between the rec center and the baseball park is when I go to the rec center, I don't think I ever bought anything because you're going there to get in shape and not all the crap they're selling. When you go to the baseball park, you're going there to eat a dog and get fat, you know, and watch the game. It's a total different. I mean, everybody that bought at the rec center, what are you guys doing?
Yeah.
You can't go for an hour without buying some food to feed your face. You know, but a baseball park, baseball, hot dogs, apple pie, Chevrolet, take me out in the ballpark. Peanuts and Cracker Jack, right? I can sing you the song, 7th inning stretch. You know, and so I'd love to try and make it work, but we can't just be make it so difficult on staff because the labor requirements, kids have to knock off at 7 o'clock and we lose $10,000-12,000 and you know.
Because I would love to make it work too. And the only way to make it work is to charge more. And then people are gonna say, oh my gosh, this is so expensive.
$20 hot dog.
I'm not gonna spend any money. And like, oh, this is even worse than
Right.
the original problem.
I mean, we added that third page just so you could kind of see the breakdown of some of the things we offered. And Haley, I talked at great length recently to try to whittle down that menu quite a bit.
Yeah.
So like when we say sell a candy bar, we're only going to sell 4 or 5 kinds rather than 12. Or when we say we probably wouldn't even offer pizza because the hassle of doing pizza wasn't worth the time. And we focus more on hot dogs and churros and pretzels and nachos and probably raise our prices at least $1 because I feel like that's still comfortable enough to do it even at $3.50 or $4. And we would just severely limit the menu. And honestly, another cost savings would be is we wouldn't probably open up the fountain machine. We probably would just do cans and bottles because just to open up the fountain machine is about $900. And we don't necessarily go through 100% of the syrup in the 6-week period of time. And so there would be some cost savings in doing it that way. And another alternative is in order to be able to stay open longer, we would only recruit 16-year-olds, period. So that we knew we could stay open from 4:30 in the afternoon until 8:30 at night. It would require probably a little bit of a bump in pay. Because right now we're paying 12 for 16-year-olds. And we're competing against in and out at 17. Or our seasonal employees where we're starting them at 14 at this point. Yeah, some of them are starting 14. So supervisors are, but concessions are at 12.
What were you paying the like 14, 15-year-olds?
10. It's more than minimum wage, but still not terrible. I guess one of the recommendations is
I just am saying what I've heard. I mean,
so one of the thoughts is you can see that Bryce and Haley are doing a great deal of trying to find an alternative. But until we have a strong recommendation, we may come to you with a budget amendment or saying, hey, we have a plan. And at this point, just having concessions is a subsidy. Now, Councilor Minkum, to your point of potentially finding volunteers, you're having the baseball program now subsidize concessions because you're saying, well, your kid can play for free, so your revenues decrease. So you can have concession workers over here. So, just be really careful about reducing the revenues in one area.
I just was thinking because we looked, I mean.
Yeah, no, I think it's
and
interesting.
And I thought about it could decrease. On the other hand, it may be kids that aren't playing. So it may not change so much, if it's people that can't afford it.
Sure.
I'm not against a third person taking it. I'm like, you guys said, if you get it too expensive, people aren't going to buy it anyway. But I wish we could give them $1.50 hot dog and a candy bar and a can of soda pop. That's just not, just a few little things that.
We're losing money when the hot dog's $2.
We had a gentleman in Ephraim because we went through the same issue in Ephraim where we managed it. We got rid of it. And we had a full rec program down in Ephraim, and we've contracted out. The guy was just selling chili and a few other things, and he felt miserably. And ultimately, the Lions Club took it over and had volunteer groups like the Manti Mountain Bike Club would manage it, and all the money they collected went to their program. So it was a fundraiser for them, and it worked really well. Rotary is not interested.
And that's what we talked about previously, to Brand's point, is do you have different groups come in and they do that as their fundraiser?
But again, as us managing it,
exactly.
if
right?
we had a
It would be-
Rotary
It would
or
be, hey,
another,
you can have it this day or these X number of days, and you can sell whatever you want to sell it, whatever you want to sell it for, have at it.
but I will also share that in Ephraim, if I ran that by Lisa now, she'd be concerned about liability, right? And having volunteers in there different times with different equipment. So I would have that concern, not just Lisa.
I thought 8-week season.
Six.
I was thinking earlier on, that, you find volunteer groups take a week at a time, but our volunteer groups are down and down and down.
Mhm.
One of the challenges also is just like Brent said, with liability. I would try to come back to with a better plan of trying to manage the personnel and try to turn it over to volunteers. Just logistically speaking, trying to work with volunteers, get them the training, make sure we're background checking all the volunteers. There's new volunteer state laws that are going to require us to give specific training to any person who interacts with youth organizations at any level, like sexual harassment training, and they have to be screened through sex offenders and things like that. So it gets a lot hairier if we start doing volunteers. So I'd much rather come back to you and say, hey, look, we've really crunched the numbers and said, hey, look, we're going to try to open it up one more year. This is the hours we're going to do. This is what we're going to try to increase in prices and fees, and try to open it up again, then try to, if we don't do a third party, I'd
Yeah, I'm
rather
okay
go
with the
that
third
direction
party.
than try to do a volunteer based.
I was gonna say, but I am am I hearing from you that there's a potential that the city opens it again, but maybe reduces this list?
Correct.
Maybe increases the cost or the price, not, your cost
Correct.
probably is what it
Another,
is. But
another alternative is if we could offer a few more tournament weekends. So like a Rocky Mountain baseball or can't remember the other ones. When we're open on those days, they can be $1,000 days. So those are pretty lucrative, but we are limited in some respects based upon either field space or availability of personnel. So that is something else to think about. In a different conversation of raising field fees and prepping fees and things like that, that would offset the cost of personnel and then still be able to open up concessions and make $1,000 on those days, because the out of towners typically spend more money than, our Centerville lights. So
Yeah, I mean, our people are there for about an hour and a half because we play all of our same age groups on one night. Where these people are there half a day.
or all day. So
Bryce,
there's some options.
Are you suggesting doing this for the rest of this season or
No,
not doing it this
we're
season,
done.
but
We're
next
done.
year?
We're
Okay.
done.
So this is, you're thinking about,
Spring 2025.
Okay.
Yeah, looking ahead.
We don't even open concessions in the fall because our numbers are half of what they are in the spring. It just doesn't make sense. We could open it up to the concessionaire that we offered it to for the spring and see if they were interested in offering it for the fall. I'm nervous though, just because, it's probably a good couple grand startup just to buy all the supplies and the inventory and things like that. I'm not sure that they would recoup that cost, and I don't want to necessarily have to be out that kind of money. But if the council wanted to do that third party concessionaire again for spring of 2025, I think that person would be interested. So we could go down that road as well. So
have we put up signage for this year, just letting people know that the concessions won't be open?
we never did, but I mean, we're done.
Oh.
Baseball season's over.
Baseball is already over?
Yeah.
It's only May.
That's a big change we made when I took over. We ended baseball season before school got out because we were seeing declining numbers.
Everybody heads out.
After
Gotcha.
People start traveling.
They don't want to be
It
here. We
was-
don't have staff to.
I haven't had kids in baseball for a long time, so I forgot. Okay.
Yeah, we're
I
done.
do- I do think you can clearly
always
see what your
early
money
to
makers
I mean,
are. Like,
Absolutely.
Right.
I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I mean, you have to look at the cost to purchase versus this selling price, but if you just look at the big ticket items, if you limited it to 6 or 7 things, maybe it'd be okay.
Yeah, no, I agree, 100%.
Speaking for myself, I don't feel strongly about this either way. I would look to you guys. What do you want to do? Do you want to try to skinny down your menu and try it, or do you want to send it out to a third party vendor? I will support whichever approach
would
you guys think is
Definitely
appropriate.
come back to Brant and staff and just really look at the numbers, because I mean, we spent $7,000 in labor last year, and we spent $7,000 in costs. So I mean, you got to look at all those different things and decide, should we
Go for it or
go
not.
for
So
it or
when
not.
you,
So-
when you say $7,000 in labor, you spent $7,000 in labor plus the cost of the supplies.
Yeah.
Which is why we took a loss.
Correct, Nate?
I mean, I think Shaylin has the right idea there, that I'm not sure that I understand it as well as you guys do. Like, I'm supportive of trying to find a solution that seems to work. I do appreciate the convenience of it when I was there, so
Yeah, and I don't disagree.
Yeah.
So we did get less applications than we did the previous year. We got 7 this year for concessions. Previous year, I think we were in the 15 to 20 range, so it would have been really hard to open it this year with just 7 people. Most of which weren't 16, and it's just tough to close down at 7 o'clock because the second game doesn't start till 7, and they're closing down at 6:30 to get them out of there by 7. So it can be a little challenging, and so I think maybe changing the age and maybe offering money and really limiting the menu and upping some of the fees could do it.
And I like your concept of using items that, to your point about the fountain drinks. If you don't sell all your drinks, then you can reuse them either for other future games and or community events.
Yeah.
It's tricky with hot dogs and pizza and
The perishables.
Yeah, the perishables.
Yeah, for sure.
Any other questions on concessions? I think Haley's got a couple of the things she wants to talk to you about.
Yeah, let's get to the other things. I think you got the consensus that we support you. Try and get it up, we're gonna have to charge more, we're gonna have to pay more, or if you hire it out,
So just, I guess, to stay on the topic of baseball somewhat, I know we have talked a lot about in the past our fees and how much we want to charge, because are we breaking even on baseball? Not quite is where we're at. So just to kind of compare to our surrounding cities is the numbers I gave you there on page 2, just so you can see we're in the hunt for that. In terms of how much and this is per person, their rate, so you can see the comparison there on what we're trying to do. When I looked at the numbers for baseball, if we're trying to go for a 100% cost recovery on our end, we're gonna have to charge over $110 per player. And that's not even tiering it out. So your high schoolers, we want them to be paying more because they've got the umpires, whereas pre-K, we're showing up, 2 teams are meeting, and we're throwing out bases on the field, essentially. So it's, you're gonna get up into the $200 range to try and for their fee to cover all their costs. Something we're providing with our leagues that some of our neighbors are or aren't, we're providing pitchers with our players, so team pitchers. So we provide a memory mate for them. That's something we do. We spend, $2,000 to $3,000 on that, depending on the numbers of the season, to provide that. We also provide medals for our participants. They get a participation medal, as well as those who place first and second in the tournament receive a medal as well. That's not something that every other entity is doing. We also have like our custom Centerville jerseys and hats. It's a higher quality jersey, a really nice hat. We like to provide that so that they are wearing them around in the community. It's just good marketing. Where most of our neighboring cities are providing something in the junior Bs. So their uniforms are all the same, generic, and ours are Centerville specific. So this is kind of an expectation in our program. We do have better equipment. I had neighboring cities that we kind of combine leagues with showing up. They didn't even have a bat. So we're not only providing all of the equipment, but we keep it safe and we keep it in really good condition, so that we're continually switching that out. So these are some things that we offer. So it's, do we want to cut services, or do we want to be able to continue to provide that high quality league?
Baseball's tough because when you think of traditional sports, some of that cost the most money. You think of baseball, football, and a lot of the other cities are offering some of the other programs like flag football and soccer, which have a really low overhead cost. And those programs are heavily subsidizing or giving revenue to the baseball or to football or whatever it may be. We really don't have that to be able to cost recovery as much as some of the other cities. So when we're collecting fees, every dollar of that people collect is going either to payroll or to equipment or to whatever it may be, and it's trying to fund itself as much as possible. We do get a pretty large sponsorship from Land of Frost, about $6,200. I don't know how long that will go on for if it will go on for a long time. It's a pretty incredible amount of money because it's not just us. There's several other cities that receive that money, and there's pretty extensive requirements for that sponsorship. I almost lost it last year due to me, but Haley got it back. But that's a big part of how we can offer these things within our program. We try to do a really good job of really shopping the market. I mean, when there's a sale that comes across, and I mean, does anybody know what a dozen baseballs cost?
I don't know.
It's gotta be close. I was
$75.
gonna say it's close to.
$75 for a dozen baseballs.
Yeah, it's been a while since I coached. It was
That's
2 or 3
basically 2 kids' registrations to cover a dozen
dollars.
baseballs.
Yeah.
So we're really trying to find deals on Black Fridays and Amazon Prime days where we can find dozens of balls for $45 or
$6 or $7 a ball now, huh?
yeah, it's pretty
What a joke.
incredible.
Yeah.
And especially in our machine pitch leagues, the balls don't last very
So-
long at all.
You said something. You still doing baseball in the fall?
Yeah.
I'm looking at these other cities. I only see one other team, city doing flag football. Why not flag football in the fall? I mean, that's catching on. I've seen less and less kids playing contact
South
football.
Davis does
They're playing
provide
flag
flag
football.
football in the fall.
So that would be a council decision to decide if.
No, I
we
didn't
want us
see it
to
on the
go-
South Davis list here.
Sorry, those are only summer offerings.
Oh,
So
okay,
that doesn't include any spring or fall
okay.
for anybody.
So that would be a council decision to see. We've tried to stay away from other sports that maybe are offered within the district. Try not to have to steal from them, but if the council felt like we wanted to try to offer some other extra programs, both of us are very capable to be able to offer those things. But we've been respectful of South Davis and what they offer, so
They still lease our field for soccer,
they do.
Yes.
but where do they play flag football at?
They play usually at a elementary, depending on what they can get from the school district.
I mean, I know you have youth football on Saturdays, but flag football during the week? I mean, I know you could slide or but the kids get out of school by 3.
And I don't
It,
know.
it could be a hoop, man.
Yeah, I think it would be great. And I don't know about flag football. I know a lot of people over there for the basketball and stuff. They can't, I mean, the rec center offers it, but you've got to be there within the first 10 minutes to sign up or you don't get on the team.
I don't know how we'd offer basketball. There's just no
You don't have,
space.
you don't have to.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying I don't know how they're, I mean, if their flag football is that same way, maybe we could have, we're not taking from them because they're not even doing half of what the people want. But I don't know anything about the flag football. I just know that I've got grandkids that it's really hard to get in over there on a basketball team because they fill up so fast.
We're happy to take suggestions and, if we want to go that direction, we can. I think Grant's in support of that and, right?
Flag football.
Yeah.
I
We're
mean,
just
I'm-
offering,
Again, I just want to make sure we preserve our relationship with South Davis Rec to some extent, and I mean, it'd be good to know what those numbers are. But again, I'm all for looking at other opportunities to keep our kids engaged, whatever that might look like.
Yeah, so I mean, Haley's got some great ideas of trying to find the balance, trying not to cheat off of other, or steal or cheat from other agencies. Because they're trying to make a profit or break even or whatever it may be. Well, she's got some great ideas of that would just make us our niche, you know, whether it's just a specific outdoor recreation program, maybe that's the niche we need to go, or maybe it's more science-based or STEM-based or, you know, club-based programs. Those are things that she has ideas for that wouldn't necessarily steal from other entities as well. So
Do we have data with regard to how many girls are participating in our programs versus boys?
I'm sure we can calculate it, but I don't have it off the top of my head. We don't have we don't specifically have a strong girls softball program. We sent all those girls to Farmington because we don't have enough. That specific program I know, but we do have girls that participate in our baseball program. I would say it's more than a dozen.
I guess what I am suggesting is, I mean, we already subsidize baseball. If we're looking to add programs, I would look to add programs that we think might appeal to our girls in this community. So that we can support them as well and provide them with outlets and things to do.
Yeah, and I think Haley's got some good ideas for that as well. There's a neighboring city in Kaysville that offers girls sports or girls night. What's Kaysville?
That's actually in West Haven. Yeah. Yeah, they have like a girls and a women's specific archery, so we can do that as well. I mean, it's anybody can participate as well in that, but we can do specific things.
What haven't you hit here, Haley, that we keep asking questions and we just love to participate, but what else do you need to get across to us?
So the other thing is those summer programs that's on page 1. These are just offerings. This is really just so you can kind of see the fee comparison and what on where we're at. So I know we're looking at in our proposed budget, and this goes for baseball as well, we're kind of proposing an increase in just the non-resident sector. So those would be, currently we're charging $5 for non-resident for all of our programs. It's proposed in the current budget. One of the changes is for a $10 increase. Total, so 10 total. So $5 increase with that.
So we looked at the numbers, and with summer camps, we had about 200 kids that were non-residents in our summer camp. So we don't necessarily know we're going to get 200 kids every year that are in that thing. So we took it to 100 and we just calculated the numbers, and that's how we balanced out. We increased our revenues to help balance out our budget with that increase. And the same thing in baseball, we had about 100 kids that were non-resident. I think we'll have more kids next year that will participate in our programs for the baseball program from other cities because of us offering kind of these little extra perks and things that set us apart from other places. So that's where the revenues have increased to offset the costs in the programs. So it's about $1,000. So also in the revenues, we were proposing a banner sponsorship campaign where we would try to go out and find businesses to sponsor banners, and that was another way to try to increase some revenue as well.
When you're marketing, and I've tried to remember if this is for the baseball specifically, but in the future, could you state that this is for boys and girls? And because some people may not know, maybe it is, they think that it is just for boys.
Yeah, we definitely could look at that for sure.
What's Trailblazers?
Trailblazers.
No, I thought maybe you were doing a play on
Oh, I'm so sorry.
balls. You know, you play sports with balls, right?
You know what? That's going to be a new
Those
program.
are the really
That's a
good
great idea.
The mayor's sense of humor. They were looking for you to sign up for it. Those are like legit ballers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, I
Must
hope
have college experience. Yep. It
You guys
does say
have done
boys
an
and
excellent job.
it does say boys
It
and
does say boys and
girls.
girls on
our-
It does? Okay, good, perfect, thank you.
So yeah.
I want to know what full steam is and what's cross.
I think you've done an excellent job. I'm glad to see all these things, and I can't thank you enough for bringing this to our youth.
I'm down there all the time and I think they've done an absolute great job. And I think it's, a lot of people have said as much to me, so. Great job.
Any other questions in our budget? We did decrease some other things like background checks a little bit.
We think we overshot that. We're pretty good at retaining most of our coaches, so there is some retention from season to season.
We are required now for insurance to back our coaches every year, so that is a cost. We are possibly switching companies as well. That would be great with the HR system. So they'll talk together and we feel like the cost increase will benefit us greatly in the long run. So that would be something that we'll be looking at as well. Luckily, all the pre-checks that we prepaid for the company that we use, they'll refund us all the prepaid money we have, so that will be still great.
Well, in other years, I've had complaints from the baseball program, the baseball things that have happened down there. And I can honestly tell you, other than the concessions, I haven't heard anything except positive this year.
We had some good coaches this year.
Yeah.
So it was good experience for the kids, at least from what I saw.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, when Haley was gone for the week and I had to reschedule games and manage the weather and all that stuff, it was nice to call some friendly coaches and be like, hey, look, this is what happens. And most people were very understanding. So it definitely makes you want to work here and really try your best to provide a quality program with great people. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Should ask for
Well,
more.
should ask for what?
Cameron asked for a raise, so they want to. Oh, more program money. Oh,
All right, so let's fly through this other stuff. We got minutes next. So we have May 7th, May work sessions, city council, and closed session minutes. Are there any changes? If not, motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Great. Let's go to financial report. This is one of the months where it is not a quarter ending, so Nate's provided them there for us, but unless you have specific questions on those, then they're there for your information. Any specific questions for Nate on the April financials? Okay. Let's go to council report. Councilwoman Meekum.
I don't have really a lot. As I told you last time, we're getting the money back from Utopia that we raised, not what we pay, but the amount it would have gone up for the year. I told you they're giving their employees the bonuses. They are increasing their salaries and they're getting 4 new employees this year. UIA debt payment of 25 and 26 are hoping to go up by $4 million a year. Our subscribers here in October was 50.24% and it's dropped down in March to 48.19. So we went down just a little bit.
It
But
dropped down to what?
48% from 52.
Why?
Move-ins, more the new growth, is that
Well, no, I mean, it's people that are,
discontinued?
yeah,
it's consistently shifting.
I mean,
Again, we're
that's not
still-
a
We're
lot.
still a little bit higher than even pre-COVID. So
People would
it's been-
rather go to Comcast.
This
mean, it's-
doesn't make a lot of sense.
Well, is that because they're putting in, I mean, we've had several companies in here putting in fiber. So is it becoming more competitive and?
So yes, there might be incentives, but we haven't really discussed that, at least on UIA either, about what that competition looks like. But also,
I love my.
we do have some new growth and they might be factored into that percentage with the Symphony Homes development and others that might be
Mm.
that percentage down. So
Okay.
could be a lot of things.
So they are looking at doing some new bonding. Which makes me a little nervous, but I'd like them to give back some of our money before they spend more. But they are going into a lot like up in Idaho and
Montana.
Wyoming, Boise,
Bozeman.
Bozeman.
Montana.
They're not taking the actual work, but they're backing the companies and they're actually making better money on those than the ones that they're actually coming out. Like ours, and they're just a backup company for them, helping them. So they seem to be doing better than they were. So they give me a little hope.
Thanks. Any questions for her? Anybody have anything pressing that we need to know about for your next time term report? Okay, mayor report. Since we met last 2 weeks ago, we did have a COG meeting. We had Syracuse hosted COG. We heard about Dave's Loan Fund, which I told you about many times before for our local businesses. We also had 2 people from Northrop Grumman come and speak. What I found in that is they're bringing in, creating more and more jobs which are higher paying, but even the higher paying jobs, their people are finding housing to be too expensive in Davis County. You know, and so we continue to be a big problem. If I were a tree, our tree board did a little competition with their elementary school kids, and they painted pictures. If they were a tree, what tree would they be? And they were kind enough to allow me to over here at Smith Park give them their medals for those that won. I went to the service meeting for the Just Serve group that's doing our service days in September. They're looking for projects. I reached out to Bruce and also other department heads of any projects that we may have within the city. So if any of you know of any projects, please filter them my way. An individual by the name of Dale Jones and is in charge of that this year. We had a Chambers Mayor Luncheon, which we have once a year, where all 15 mayors go to the Davis Tech and report on their cities and what's happening. That was a fun day. It's always a nice day, but it was kind of a somber day as much as the day before had been the funeral of one of our mayors, our sitting mayors, Mayor Howard Madsen from Sunset passed away a couple of weeks ago. And so he's just a good old guy. Been mayor of Colville as well too. Was in his second term at Sunset, and he'd also been a highway patrolman during his career. Good man. It's Public Works Week this week, so everybody remember that. We had a little nice breakfast with them. Fire board meeting was yesterday, and Brent did a marvelous job, and he's the chair of the admin committee this year of presenting our fire board budget. It was kind of fun because I'm the chair of the board this year, and on the agenda it had Mr. Hanson, so I kept calling him Mr. Hanson. You know, it was driving him crazy. After about the third or fourth look, I thought I better go back to Brad. So, and we discussed the tier 1, tier 2 stuff was over there as well yesterday. So, and then on May 27th, just so y'all know, that's Memorial Day. They're doing over at the Battlefield Veterans Park, which is for all 5 of our southern cities. They're doing another program in the park that day, starting at 11 o'clock. And you're all invited. So, any questions for me? Okay, Brent, city manager report.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just have a few items. Again, I do share and also just recognizing Public Works Appreciation Week. We do appreciate our Public Works employees and all they do. They're the unsung heroes. They just behind the scenes get things done. Don't necessarily want the glory, but I would like to give it to them. But I do want to recognize all they do for our city. And I think this week, give them 1 week to really vocally share how much we do appreciate them is the least we can do. So appreciate what you do, Dave, and share that with your employees, please. Just want to let you know, we had 20 qualified applicants for the chief of police position. 3 of those candidates were internal. So we had more than that, but Bryce did a great job weeding out those that didn't meet the minimum qualifications. There are a number from in-state as well as out of state. So the screening committee will be meeting on Thursday to go through those 20 applicants. And based on where that conversation goes, we may have a interview with those first applicants and then have the follow-up for city council with those that are kind of, narrowed down. So it was great to see who did apply. I mean, there are definitely some interested qualified candidates for the position, and I really appreciate the 3 internal candidates who did apply. They're very well qualified as well to lead the department.
Brent, who are our screening panel? Who is on that?
It's a good question. So it's the mayor,
Robin.
Councilor Meekum, and Councilor Hurd. It's shifted, so so those are the 3 from the elected. The officers are Sergeant Mike Dingman, Detective Holly Coons, and Officer Dalton Groen. So you've got a really good mix there, from really young officer to very experienced veteran sergeant, and then in between with Holly, and of course representing the female perspective as well. So we want to make sure we have the female representation on the panel.
Thanks to those on the city council for doing that.
Yep, great. And myself, of course. And then Chief will be an advisor, kind of just helping us if we're looking at something, if there's some terminology in there or what we're looking for, because again, there's some schooling on there that Chief could say, well, hey, look, that's what they were taught in this training, or anyway. So he'll help guide us during that process. Just want to reiterate, I shared my message about National Police Week last week. It was an amazing experience. I'm grateful for the opportunity I had to spend some time with our officers, and especially our chief as he's on his way out. We had a day of just chatting, and that was really great to get to know him a little bit deeper before he moves on from us. But he will be greatly missed. Even as we're walking around, random people that I think were random coming to, oh, say Chief Child, and just knew everybody. It was just awesome. So candlelight vigil, thousands of people there. The memorial service was well done, and reading of the 226 names. It was a lot, but seeing those survivors was really difficult, particularly the children, right? But anyway, I really appreciate that opportunity. But while I was out there also, it was kind of interesting. I didn't coordinate any meetings with our representatives or the Ferguson group or anybody, because I wasn't quite sure of my commitment with the officers and what they had going on. But I was able to schedule a meeting with the Ferguson group. So Mike Miller and I met to just kind of touch base and see what do we need to do about our grants. And we discussed potentially 7 opportunities we'll be pursuing. And then really the police department's kind of a tough one to pursue because of our situation and the number of calls, but 1250 West, the drainage up in the bowl area and what we can do there, the offer storage and retention. But also we want to really engage in, I mentioned public art. I'd really like to find money for more public art structures. As a former artist, I don't call myself that anymore because I don't do much, but I really appreciate art. And I think there's some opportunity along, our main areas to find some public art opportunities. So there's grants for that, parks opportunities, trails opportunities. So I'm looking at changing up the way we have our bi-weekly meeting with them. And instead of everybody sitting through public works, maybe we have separate parks meetings and a separate public works and a separate police and a separate, so we don't waste anybody's time. So that was great. And then Dalton Groen, Officer Dalton Groen, is cousins with the chief of staff for Congresswoman Malloy, who had dinner Wednesday night. I was flying out Thursday evening. And the chief of staff for Congresswoman Malloy reached out and says, hey, you got time to meet tomorrow? And so we met, and she's just an amazing person. Really appreciate her and all she's done to represent Centerville and all of our projects. She's successful, and it's really interesting that she reached out to me saying, essentially, can you meet? Because I didn't want to necessarily bother them last minute and try to coordinate something. But anyway, that meant a lot to me, and I think that just shows how much she cares about her constituents. So that was kind of neat. So we had a great meeting. It was more a little informal, asked what we can do and what they can do to help us. And I just kind of reiterated our conversation with the Ferguson group. But anyway, that was a great meeting. And last item, I do want to share that future minutes, there's going to be a little bit of a shift that we're trying out. Is it okay if I share this? So we are recording secretary, Katie Rust, has decided no longer provide our minutes, which she has been amazing and she'll be greatly missed. So instead of us finding a new recording secretary right away, there's some opportunities with AI that we really want to explore. So with that, there's AI, but then there needs that human element to verify. So Jennifer is going to attempt it, but we do have backup plans. We have another recording secretary who's offered their services, but we want to try this AI option. So the minutes might be a little different. So be a little patient, but we're open
You
to the
mean
feedback.
really review them in detail.
I wasn't even at the meeting. How did that show up?
Hey, it could be the way we're going. I was down in my attorney conference and my Uber driver was, worked for a county in law enforcement and he was pretty high up, but he said they're using AI to write the police reports and that it's been extremely accurate. Like it listens to everything and it pulls things out. And it was really interesting about how, like it knew which pieces, anyway.
So they have like a template and would automatically fill in kind of the.
Sort of, but then, yeah, then the officer does have to go in and fill in other, specific pieces, but
Pretty
anyway,
amazing.
it's, yeah.
So we're gonna try that out.
I got his name and number.
Could have guessed this.
He also said
Cutting
something
edge
about fleet.
in the AI.
No, but the report, that's the worst part of the job, right? That's what he said, and it just, anyway. it was interesting.
And Mr. Mayor, that's all I have unless there's questions.
Any questions, Brad? I gotta say one last thing. I forgot, neglected to thank, when I was at the service meeting, there was an individual there by the name of John Hollingshead. Many of you know John. I said, because I've been out of town, and he says, who got those flags out at the police signs at the city hall? And he says, I got some volunteers. We got them out. But I'm assuming Public Works got everything up on the poles as well too, along our. But my son's dad, who's a policeman down in Los Angeles, we went to his father-in-law. We went to dinner Saturday night, and as we were coming back from the Mandarin along Main Street, he was going, "This is amazing." He said, "We don't get this kind of thing in Los Angeles where I'm at." So he said, "So I got to thank whoever was involved with that as well too, for all the great work they did." So, all right. Anything else? Motion to adjourn. All right. Adjourn.
Oh,
Give us-
I really want to go.
So,